things that are very normal to you and I, going out to dinner with our families, that doesn't happen as much, right? Because you're not going to have that extra cash. A lot of hungry children, I'm going to focus mostly on kids in poverty in the school system, and if you want to know about others, I can. But you will have kids in high poverty districts that come to school and can't focus because they're really, really hungry, right? That's why most of the schools in Decatur have breakfast in the classroom. So kids don't go to the cafeteria, but in their classroom, there are, like, your food service comes around and serves, they have a hot breakfast in every classroom because kids can't really focus if they're hungry, and then they're upset. Oftentimes, lack of access, like I was talking about, to water, so maybe not as many showers, things like that for personal hygiene as you need. Medical support, so maybe not going to the doctor as much as they should, not going to the dentist. I mean, there are kids that haven't been to the dentist until they get into high school, and the high schools require a dental exam when you're living in poverty because their parents have never gone to a dentist. They've never had insurance. So those are the things that come to mind that I haven't already talked about.
I'm just going to ask one because you kind of answered the other two. How do you think people who aren't homeless view people who are?
People who are or are not?
Are not homeless view people who are.
Generally, our society likes to blame people for their situation. And it's probably divided. I think there's a large chunk that blame because they don't understand it. So, you think, well, they should go to work, or they should go to some government program, or they should do this. So generally, I think people blame homelessness. But there's also, I think, a growing group of people who empathize and are trying to understand how people end up in that situation, because it's different for everyone. Sometimes you will have, remind me to come back to a tour for you guys. Sometimes you will have moms who are in an abusive situation and they will take their kids and leave. So they end up homeless living in a car, right? But if you don't know that and don't talk to the kids and family about it, you'll be like, she needs to get it together. Well, she might be running from an abusive spouse. So I think there's a good growing population that's trying to understand it, but the majority of people blame or try to ignore because it makes you uncomfortable. I'm going to detour too. I took my kids to Los Angeles when they were probably 10 and 8. And we stayed at the Westin, which is a very nice hotel on a main strip, but probably a half a block from our hotel was kind of an overpass, like a highway overpass, and there might be 50 homeless people just sleeping out underneath this bridge, right? And so my kids were like freaking out. They're like, we do not want to walk by there. Like, they did not want to go. I'm like, they're not going to do it. So we had to talk to them a lot about homelessness at an early age, but it's that natural tendency to, you don't understand it, it makes you uncomfortable, so you just blame it and try to ignore it as much as you can instead of trying to understand it. On the tour, because I'll go to that now before I forget, and I don't know how we would ever make this happen, but Decatur offers a tour through United Way. That might be a project in one of your classes you could look at sometimes. And so what it does is you go on this bus tour to understand things in poverty and homelessness and things like that. So you go around to all of these different shelters, and you go to like Salvation Army Men's Shelter, and you go to Dove, which is where abused wives are, and so moms live there with their children. And so you go to all of these different services. There's it's not a food shelter, but it's a day center. And so they serve homeless people during the day. And Bloomington, I'm sure, has the same thing. So United Way takes you on this bus tour, and you just get to see what all those resources are, and it helps you understand different people live in those situations for different reasons. But probably the most powerful part of the tour is there's a 911 call, and it's a kid calling because the parents are fighting. And so it just makes you really understand that a lot of people live differently than we do, and that's probably one of the things that changed my view on homelessness. Are you next, Campbell? No?
Did you try to help the homeless kids, and if so, how?
Mostly through PE clothes and things like that. That would be embarrassing to kids to not have. But I think the best thing you can do is to sit and talk with them. And I always tell kids, because kids will sometimes blame their parents too if they're homeless. So you'll have that, like, he needs to get a job. Sometimes they'll be alcoholics, right? Or they'll have their own substance abuse problems or mental health issues. And so they will sometimes even blame their parents. And so I always tell kids, your job is to become a better parent than your parents were. that doesn't mean your parents are bad people. All parents make mistakes. I want my kids to be a better parent than I am. I can name a bunch of mistakes I've made. And so trying to have conversations with kids and get them to understand this doesn't have to be your life, right? And how do you get out of something like homelessness? And so I talk to them a lot about the importance of education because that's what changed it. I wasn't homeless, but I definitely lived in poverty. And so how do you change your circumstances? And it's usually through education, because that then gets you into a world where you can communicate with professionals and where you can apply for professional jobs and you can kind of change your income in life. Make sense?
Okay, so 2 of my questions were already answered, but
Because I just kept talking and talking?
It's alright. But my last one was, what was the main reason kids in school were homeless, do you think?
Here or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Okay. It's well, it's so different. Do I only get to give one? Is it main reason or main reasons?
Main reasons.
Okay, so I think reasons are the cost of housing if you are working a minimum wage job. So there are a lot of people who work minimum wage jobs and they can't afford their own home if they have several kids, that sort of thing, a home big enough. So they will live with other families. They'll live with their cousins, they'll live with aunts, they'll double up, right? Which is often labeled as homelessness. And I think another big area, another big reason is mental health issues and substance abuse. So a lot of times when people are destitute, they will turn to drugs and alcohol. And you'll be like, why would they take the only $5 they have and buy alcohol? Because that's how they cope with their pain, right? For some people it's food, for some people it's alcohol, drugs, whatever it is. So that's kind of how they cope. And we don't understand it because we don't do that. We have healthy coping skills. Hopefully nobody in here is an alcoholic or drug addict. But mental health issues, I think, are growing and growing. And that's why some homeless people that you will meet or encounter, probably not hang out with, but encounter, will seem crazy, and they're not getting the medication they need to keep their mental health stable, right? And that will often lead to homelessness. So you also have veterans of war that have mental health issues that will end up there. So those would be kind of the 3 big areas, I think.
Oh, me. Okay. Did homeless kids try covering up that they were homeless, like in schools?
Yes. Homeless kids do, and I think definitely in poverty. So when I was a kid, I babysat a lot, so I'd have my own money. And my brother and sisters didn't really care about being poor. Like, they would go in the grocery store and use, do you know what a link card is? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's like food stamps, but the government gives low-income people some resources to buy food. So when I was a kid, they were like food stamps, and it looked like Monopoly money, but it was like even faker looking. So it was like embarrassing to be poor because you had to go to the store and buy your food with like these brown $1 bills, right? So my brother and sister were like fine. They didn't care. They would buy whatever. Like they just act. But I was like the one that was like, oh my God, I cannot be seen, using that. So they try to cover it up. So like I would never go in the store. Guess jeans. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, yeah, because I'm really old. So Guess jeans were really popular, and they have a upside down triangle in the back pocket. Okay, you have to Google this later. So I would buy generic jeans because we didn't have any money. But I would rip which is really stupid by the way, but it seemed like a great idea at the time. So I would rip the triangle label off, right? So it looked like I had Guess jeans, but like my label came off. It seemed like a great strategy. So kids will do things like that to look like they fit in. That's why you will see in Decatur there's a lot of kids with like fake Jordans, right? Like knockoffs, because they don't want to stand out. Like most teens want to just go with the flow. I think as social networking continues to evolve, kids are more happy being their individual self, but generally kids don't want to stand out until they get old enough to be like, I don't care. I like art and music, and I'm not going to ever be a job. They'll get to that point, but for the most part, they just try to blend in. It's usually through altering their clothing. If they get a job, they'll spend all their money on like one thing. They probably could have bought 10 pair of pants, right? But instead they bought a $200 pair of shoes to fit in with other kids that have resources. That sort of thing. That's what most kids do.
Okay, was there like an average age of homeless kids, or was it just like all over the place?
No, it's really all ages. High school kids hide it better. The older they get, the more they hide it. So kids often won't fill out the paperwork. Their parents often won't come in to register them, and you'll have kids fill it out, and they won't fill out paperwork for resources unless you have a pretty good relationship with them. And I will tell kids, you know, being homeless on this paper doesn't mean crap, except for you're going to get some resources, right? So take the resources, right? I mean, I'm going to give them to you even if you don't fill out the paper. So I just kind of bully them into filling it out. But you have to get to know kids first, because they will do everything they can to hide it. No, I'm fine. I'll stay with, you know, they'll make up stuff. You have to chase them around for a while. In larger schools, sometimes they'll hang around the school a lot at night. So they won't really leave afterwards because they may not have anywhere to go. So you'll start to notice kids that are there a lot longer than they should be. And it's not because they're involved or waiting for a game. It's just they don't have anywhere to go. So you got to look for those signs sometimes.
Okay, two of my questions were already answered, but did anybody have to drop out of school because of homelessness?
Yes. It's probably more common than actually graduating, which is part of the reason that larger districts have a high dropout rate. So they get to an age where it's embarrassing, right? When they're young, a lot of times kids don't care if you like give them food to send home with them. But when you're in high school, like nobody wants to be. When I was a kid, they would call us to the office over the intercom, which I will never do because it's so embarrassing. And so they would like read our names off, and then they would give us like a Thanksgiving basket. And it's like, here's all the like poor kids carrying out. I'm like, what the heck? I would like not take, I would not go. I would like ditch the office, do anything I could. So we've changed in schools where we don't do things like that as much. But those kind of things, when they do happen, scare kids off, and they don't want to come to school, right? They can't get their work done at night if you're in a 1-to-1 district. Here, everybody gets a device, but in some districts you have to pay. Here you pay, right? $75, I think, for a Chromebook. In Decatur, they're free, and all students have MacBooks. Because when we tried to charge, we have insurance on them, so if they get lost or, you know. But when we charged, you couldn't collect it because families didn't have $50, right? And so then you had kids who couldn't even do their work at night. And the only reason, for example, Decatur didn't go with Chromebooks is because you have to have Wi-Fi. And so a lot of kids there don't have Wi-Fi. So you had to go with a more expensive model because they don't have internet access at home, right? So if I'm a homeless kid and don't even have power access, or you get embarrassed come to school because some teachers are mad at you for not having your homework done, but they don't know that, you know, they were sleeping on somebody's couch last night or in a car or whatever. So it often leads to dropping out and, you know, as kids get older. Good question. Any more? You guys want me to tell you more stories?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think I have any, but.
One more thing.
Sure.
Can you describe food stamps?
Sure. So it's part of what most people refer to as the welfare system or public aid. So families who are at certain poverty levels or don't make enough money will get a certain dollar amount per child. And I'm totally making these numbers up because I haven't gotten public assistance in a long time. But maybe if you have 4 kids, you get $100 per kid a month. There's some sort of determination of how much you get. And they were called food stamps when I was a kid because it looked like Monopoly money in this like paper book that was stapled on the end. And so like I remember ones were brown. Who has brown money again? And then there was like, I don't even remember because I must have only got $1 bills. So there were like 5, 10s, 20s. And you could only buy food products. So you can't buy alcohol, right? Tobacco, things like that. It's one way the government tries to help families in poverty, but not contribute to the alcohol, etc. So now, and it's called, for a while it went to a link card, and now I think it's called SNAP. If you look at the store when you check out at a debit card, if you watch your parents, it'll say like EBT on the little computer thing. That is what I call food stamps, but it's called something else now, SNAP or link card. So now it looks like a debit card. So see what I was talking about earlier where kids would be embarrassed before? Now it would just look like you people probably, when you're in Bloomington, are paying with it all the time and you don't even know because it just looks like a debit card. Whereas when I was a kid, you'd like have to get out your ones and tear. I mean, it was like the most humiliating experience you could ever have. So, but you can only buy certain things. Like I said, you can't buy, you know, alcohol, drugs. You can only buy necessity type items. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? That's it? So you guys have to write a paper or a project?
We're reading a book called Paper Things.
Oh yeah, I wanted to read a copy of that. A kid was in here in trouble one day, so I just started reading this book, but I read a little bit of it. It's about a girl that, is it a brother and sister?
Yeah.
I only read like 4 pages.